The wind howled like a creature mourning its kin, sweeping across the moonlit riverbank with a savage chill. The stars above blinked through torn clouds, indifferent witnesses to what was about to happen. Down by the water, 4 settlers stood in a crooked semicircle, their boots sunk into the muddy earth, their breath fogging in the cold night air. And between them, barefoot, soaked in bruises, her wrists bound, stood the widow. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. If anything, her eyes shone darker than the river behind her. "Damn which should have never come west," one of the men muttered, shifting the rifle slung over his shoulder. Cursed everything she touched. First her husband, then the fields, now the town. Another, younger, spit into the dirt. "We gave her time to leave. She didn't." The third man, older than the others, cleared his throat and looked at the woman as though something about her unsettled him. Maybe it was the way she held her head high, even with the ropes digging into her skin. Maybe it was the way she hadn't screamed when they dragged her from her cabin. Or maybe it was because some part of him knew they were the cursed ones. "You got any last words?" he asked, quieter than the rest. She answered without hesitation. "You'll never see spring." A pause. That was all. Then the final man stepped forward and shoved her hard into the river. The current was waiting. The water swallowed her with a vicious splash, pulling her beneath with cold hands. There was no time for air, no time to brace. She hit rocks, her arms flailing uselessly behind her back. Darkness wrapped her like a shroud. She twisted, kicked, tried to breach the surface, but her skirts tangled her like seaweed, and the river wanted her gone. Above, the men watched for a while, then turned and walked back toward their horses, not bothering to check if she resurfaced. It didn't matter. The river always finished the job. But the river had never met a woman like her. She broke the surface once, gasping, coughing out a mouthful of silt. Her lips turned blue, hair matted to her skull. She thrashed toward a fallen tree caught in the reeds, her body slamming into it. The bark tore at her shoulder. She didn't stop. With numb fingers and wrists that barely obeyed, she clawed up the trunk and slumped across it, barely breathing. She was alive. For now. Somewhere upstream, an owl cried once, sharp and lonesome. She passed out, and the river carried her gently now, like a child rocked by fate. Morning arrived without warmth. The clouds hung low and heavy, the ground damp with dew and regret. Somewhere near the canyon's edge, a horse snorted, and a figure crouched by the riverbank, studying the form tangled in the reeds. He was tall, draped in a hide-lined cloak of earthy tones, his hair long and tied back with leather cords. His face bore the weathering of many winters, lines of silence, patience, and scars. He had tracked elk, fought white men and wild wolves, and buried his own blood beneath cottonwood trees. But the woman before him, pale, broken, breathing still, she was not prey nor ghost. He looked up at the sky as if waiting for a sign. None came. So he moved. In one smooth motion, he stepped into the water, boots silent even in the shallows. He untangled her from the branches, lifted her into his arms with a grunt, and turned toward the hills. "You don't belong to them," he muttered in Dine, his native tongue. "And you don't belong to the river." The cave was small, hidden beneath a sandstone ridge and nestled among pines. Smoke from the morning fire drifted lazily upward, merging with the mountain mist. Inside, she lay bundled in furs, her skin paler now, lips cracked, but alive. He watched her sleep. He hadn't meant to find anyone today. He came to track deer. Instead, he found someone discarded like a thing, barely more than breath and bruises. That stirred something buried deep in him. The last time he felt it, he'd been holding his wife's hand as she died from settler bullet. Hours passed. He kept the fire alive, brewed crushed juniper into steam, and laid crushed bark poultices on her wound. Her eyes twitched behind shut lids, her hands curling as if ready to fight something in her dreams. Then, just after dusk, she woke. Her body jerked up instinctively, eyes wild with panic. She tried to rise, but her limbs gave out. Her breath came hard and fast. "Easy," he said, his voice a deep rumble. She froze. Her gaze swept over the cave, then locked on him. Where am I? Her voice was raw, but not weak. Safe. That's not what I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for a clay bowl and placed it gently beside her. Drink. You lost blood. She eyed the bowl like it might bite her. Then her brow creased. Why did you help me? He shrugged. Because no one else did. Silence. Then, quietly, she asked, Are you going to keep me? The question hit him harder than he expected. I'm not one of them. Then what are you? His eyes held hers. A man who knows what it's like to lose everything. She didn't respond, but her shoulders sagged a little. She drank. The days passed slowly, yet never without movement. Her strength returned, first in her voice, then in her limbs. She could walk by the third day, though she limped. Her wrists remained tender, and her ribs ached when she breathed deep. But she refused to rest longer than she had to. He told her little. Only that his name was Taza and that he lived alone. She told him nothing. Not her name. Not what happened. But when she thought he was asleep, she whispered to the fire. They said I cursed the crops. Another night, my husband died too fast. They didn't like that I didn't cry. One evening, as the sky bled red over the pines, she stood just outside the cave, staring at the horizon. Her hair was tangled. Her shawl was patched. But her spine was straight. Do you ever go to town? She asked. Not anymore. Good, she said. That town's full of cowards. Taza stood beside her. They tried to kill you. Yes. She turned her face to him. And they failed. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then she said, I should hate you. Why? Because you remind me I'm still alive. There was no answer for that. Later that night, he found her by the fire, holding one of his knives. Not threateningly. Just turning it in her hands, studying it. You could have let me die, she said, not looking up. You weren't meant to. You don't even know me. I know enough. You fight the river. Most don't. She finally met his eyes. My name's Clara. He nodded. Good. I was tired of calling you the stubborn one. A faint smile tugged at her lips. I want to go back, she said. No. I'm not asking. If you return, they will finish what they started. I don't care. You should. I care more about looking them in the eye, she whispered, voice shaking. I need them to see me. Alive. He said nothing for a while. The fire popped. Sparks leapt like ghosts into the night. If you go, he finally said, I go with you. She blinked. Why? Because even the strongest trees fall alone. A gust of wind stirred the flames between them. For a moment Clara said nothing. Then she nodded once. Then we'll go. Outside, in the forest beyond the cave, wolves howled in the distance. The world wasn't safe. It never had been. But for the first time in weeks, Clara didn't feel alone. And somewhere deep in the wild, fate took a breath and changed its course. The morning they left the cave was cold and colorless, the frost clinging to pine needles like the memory of death. Clara stood by Taza's horse, wrapped in a thick woven blanket, her hair braided back tightly, jaw clenched against the ache in her ribs and the fear in her chest. She hadn't ridden in weeks, hadn't ridden alone in years, but she climbed onto the saddle without help. Taza mounted behind her, silent. The horse grunted beneath their weight, then began down the narrow game trail that wound through the canyon like a forgotten scar. They didn't speak for hours. The trail widened as it dipped into lower terrain. The river they'd both escaped shimmered far to the left, winding its way toward the town like a black thread unraveling across earth. Every hoofbeat brought her closer. Every breath she took felt heavier. Do they fear you? She asked at last, her voice muffled against the wind. No, Taza replied. They try to ignore me. Pretend I don't belong. It's easier for them that way. You ride straight into a town that would hang you for breathing. For me. He looked past her, eyes steady on the horizon. Not for you. For justice. She didn't ask what he meant by that. The word sat strange in her mouth. Justice was something men in town spoke of in church pews and saloons, not something they handed out. It was easier to call a woman cursed than admit you envied her strength. As they neared the outlying fences of dry cattle fields and rotting posts, Clara's hand unconsciously slid toward the small knife hidden inside her boot. Taza noticed. He said nothing. By midday, they reached a ledge that overlooked the town, no more than a cluster of weather-beaten buildings, a few horses tied near the stable, a church steeple casting its shadow over cracked boards. From here, Clara could see the window of the chapel where she'd once sung hymns beside her husband, before he was shot in the back by the same men who tossed her in the river. Clara dismounted first. Her legs trembled when her boots hit dirt, but she steadied herself. Taza didn't move. "What now?" he asked. She stared down at the town like it was a battlefield. "I want what's mine." "Revenge." "No," she said slowly. "Truth. Truth so ugly it can't be buried anymore." He nodded, then handed her a pouch wrapped in leather. Inside it was her husband's journal, pages dry and torn, ink faded but legible. She'd told Taza about it only once, half asleep beside the fire. Her husband had written names, land deeds, agreements not signed by law but carved in betrayal. Clara had hidden it beneath the chapel floorboards before they killed him. "Do you believe they'll listen to truth?" he asked. "No," she said. "But I want them to hear it anyway." The town didn't stop when she walked in, but it stuttered. The blacksmith paused mid-hammer. The postmaster dropped a stack of telegrams. A child holding a tin cup stared with his mouth open. Even the wind quieted. Clara's boots thudded across dry wood. Her shoulders were straight, face clean but hard. Taza walked behind her, not guarding, just present. Unapologetically present. Someone whispered her name. "She's dead," said another voice. "She's supposed to be dead." Clara stopped in front of the sheriff's office. The door opened before she could knock. Sheriff Alden was an old dog with eyes like burnt coal and skin that looked boiled in whiskey. He hadn't been the one to throw her in the river, but he'd watched. And done nothing. He looked at her like a ghost had climbed out of the river and come knocking. "You're not welcome here, Clara." She reached into her blanket and held out the journal. "Then I'll take your silence as confession." He didn't touch it. "You got no proof that book means anything." "You had no proof I was cursed," she said. "Didn't stop you." Voices gathered behind her. The townsfolk were emerging now, men with hats low in hands near their belts, women with eyes wide and mouths pursed. Taza stepped forward, slow and deliberate. "I'd think carefully before drawing steel." The sheriff glanced at him, then back to Clara. "You think this'll bring your husband back?" "No," she whispered. "But maybe it'll stop the next widow from being drowned, because she wouldn't lie down and take what was done to her." The tension snapped like a wire stretched too far. From the corner of her eye, Clara saw movement, someone from the saloon steps, one of the younger men who'd helped drag her out that night. He stepped forward, gun loose in his hand. Taza moved first. His knife flashed silver before the gun was fully drawn. The boy dropped his weapon and clutched his hand, screaming. Taza hadn't cut deep, just enough to stop him. "No more blood," Clara said, her voice sharp. "Not today." The sheriff gestured toward her. "You want justice? Fine. Let the circuit judge handle it when he passes through next week. But if you stay here—" "I won't," she interrupted. "I've got no more use for this place." She walked to the chapel. The pews were dust-covered. The pulpit leaned slightly to the left. Behind the altar, she found the loose board she remembered. Beneath it, wrapped in canvas, were the original land deeds her husband had kept. Stamp. Sign. Stolen. She didn't bother with ceremony. She handed them to Taza as they left. Outside, the town had gathered like flies to a wound. Clara turned to face them. "You all knew," she said. "And you let them kill a man. Then tried to kill his wife. You blamed me for your drought, your debts, your dead dreams. A woman near the back flinched. I'm not cursed, Clara said. I'm just not afraid of truth anymore. She didn't wait for their response. She turned and walked away. Taza rode beside her, the journal tied behind his saddle. You meant what you said, he told her. About not staying. There's nothing left here. Then where? Clara didn't answer at first. Then, someplace where names don't come with a noose. Someplace with sky instead of fences. They rode into the hills. For a while, neither spoke. Then Clara said, They'll forget me. Taza glanced at her. Not all stories are meant for their ears. She thought about that. When the sun began to fall, they camped beneath an old cottonwood. The bark was scarred, the limbs twisted. She sat across from Taza at the fire, watching sparks drift upward like fading wishes. I should be dead, she said, almost to herself. You're not. And you. You just found me. Took me in. Why? He stirred the fire with a stick, watching the embers glow. Because I know what it is to be cast out. Because you fought the river. Because you didn't give up. Clara pulled the blanket tighter. You lost someone too. He nodded. Your wife. He nodded again. She didn't press. They sat in silence until the fire burned low. Then, just before sleep, Clara whispered, I don't think I can ever love again. Taza didn't look at her. You don't have to. The night deepened. Wind slid between the trees. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes called across the ridgeline. Clara stared up at the stars. She'd come seeking truth, found pain, and walked away with something else, something unspoken but alive. Not safety. Not revenge. But something far older. A beginning. And far above, the stars blinked, indifferent still, but maybe, just maybe, watching. The high plains stretched out like parchment scorched by the sun, vast, dry, and whispering old secrets in the wind. Clara stood at the edge of a red bluff, her shawl snapping against her arms, hair braided tightly down her back. Her face, though sun-marked and weary, bore the calm of someone no longer running. Behind her, the land rolled with golden scrub and scattered cottonwood. Somewhere below, a coyote cried, and its voice echoed through the empty belly of the land. Clara didn't flinch. She knew now the sound of real danger, and it didn't howl in the dark. It crept in daylight, with false smiles and loaded words. Taza emerged from behind the hill's curve, leading 2 horses. He held the reins loosely, walking as if he belonged to the land itself, fluid, quiet, certain. She turned when she heard him, her eyes scanning the saddlebags. Any luck? She asked. A few rabbits, he said, tossing a wrapped bundle near the fire pit. Enough for supper. She smiled faintly. Still not sure why you let me do the cooking. Because you're stubborn, he said. And I like not being stabbed with your spoon. It had been weeks since they left the town behind. They moved often, camped near water when they could, kept far from roads. Clara had learned to ride long days without complaint, to read the sky for signs of rain, and to sense the shifting silence that meant someone, or something, was too close. But even as the landscape changed, something in her remained unsettled. That night, as they ate beside a low-burning fire, she watched Taza across the flames. His face was marked by soot and shadow. His eyes, always so focused and sharp, now flicked toward the horizon more than usual. He was listening to something she couldn't hear. You think we're being followed, she said quietly. He didn't answer at first. Then, yes. Settlers. No. Not from the town. She set her tin plate down. Then who? I'm not sure. The wind picked up, sending ash spiraling. Clara reached for the knife at her hip, fingers tightening around the worn leather grip. We could head north, she offered. Get lost in the hills. Maybe cross into territory they won't chase us through. Taza shook his head. Too open. Too many ridges. If someone's hunting us, they'll see us days away. Clara stood, scanning the hills. So what do we do? He met her gaze. We stop running. They broke camp before sunrise. The sky was bruised with streaks of red and purple, and the ground still held the cool breath of night. Clara rode behind Taza, rifle slung across her back, her jaw set. By midday, they reached a basin nestled between jagged cliffs. A stream ran thin through the center, lined with juniper and willow. Taza dismounted and scanned the ridgeline. "We make our stand here," he said. Clara stared at him. "You're certain they'll come? They're already close. Whoever they are." She wanted to argue, but something in his voice silenced her. It wasn't fear, it was fact. A knowing carved from experience. They set snares, dug a narrow trench near the edge of camp, and cleared a field of fire beyond the boulders. Clara moved with purpose, her hands steady even as her heart climbed her throat. She hadn't trained for war, hadn't fired a rifle since her husband taught her before the wedding, but survival had a way of awakening what sleep and grief tried to bury. As dusk bled into night, Taza lit only a single candle shielded by stone. They ate quietly. Clara sat beside him, pressing bullets into a cloth pouch. "Do you think they're after me?" she asked. "No. But they might be." He nodded. "Or me. Or both." She took a breath. "Then I hope they bring enough men." Taza's smile was faint. "You sound like a warrior." "I sound like a woman tired of being hunted." The first shot rang out just after midnight. Clara ducked instinctively, rolling behind the stacked rocks. Taza was already moving, crouched low, knife drawn in one hand, rifle in the other. A second shot followed, closer this time. Then a voice called out from the dark. "We just want the woman. You give her up, you both walk away." Taza stood, slowly, behind the boulder. "Come get her." Another shot cracked past his shoulder. Clara, lying prone, took aim with her rifle. She couldn't see clearly, but she fired anyway. A scream followed. Then silence. The enemy, whoever they were, fell back. An hour passed. Then 2. Clara didn't sleep. She leaned against the stone, eyes wide, ears straining. Near dawn, movement stirred in the brush. Clara raised her rifle, but Taza's hand caught her wrist. He nodded toward the slope. A single figure staggered forward, limping. He was lean, with a patched coat and blood soaking through the leg. His skin was pale from blood loss, his left hand trembling from a poorly bandaged wound. "I ain't got no more fight," he wheezed, collapsing near the fire pit. Taza crouched beside him. "Who sent you?" The man coughed, spat blood, and looked at Clara. "They said you killed your husband. Said you poisoned the well. Paid good money to drag you back." Clara knelt beside him, voice cold. "And who told you that?" "Land agent from Copper Ridge. Claimed your claim was still valid. Big money. Folks down south want that land." Taza's face darkened. "You hunted her for a deed?" "Ain't personal," the man whispered. "Just bounty." He slumped to the side. Dead. Clara sat back on her heels, staring at the rising sun. The sky turned gold, painting everything in false warmth. "It never ends," she whispered. Taza stood. "Then we end it." They buried the man without ceremony. That afternoon, they followed the trail the bounty hunters had used to reach them. Hoof prints, discarded cartridges, broken branches. Clara moved like someone possessed. Not with rage, but with clarity. She wasn't prey. Not anymore. 3 days later, they reached Copper Ridge. It was a mining town, larger, louder, fouler. Smoke choked the sky. Men staggered drunk through alleys. Women watched from behind curtained windows. But the land office stood tall near the center, trimmed in bright red paint like blood around a wound. Clara stood outside it, heart thudding in her ears. Taza looked at her. "You don't have to go in." "I do." The clerk behind the counter was fat, balding, and smirked as she entered. "Name?" he asked lazily. She set the leather-bound journal on the desk, open to the deed. His face paled. "Where's the agent who filed this bounty?" she asked. He didn't answer. Taza stepped forward, knife still sheathed but visible. The clerk stammered. He's upstairs. They found him packing." He was tall, clean-shaven, and not the least surprised to see her. "Mrs. Renshaw," he said with false courtesy. I thought you were dead, she finished. He raised his hands. This is all a misunderstanding. Purely legal. You sent men to kill me. Technically, they weren't instructed to. She stepped closer. You lied. You spread rumors. You stole my name. My land. He took a step back. I was just following the bank's interests. Taza pulled the knife. Clara put a hand on his arm. No, she said. Let him run. The agent's face twisted in confusion. What? Clara leaned in. But if I ever hear my name in your mouth again, I'll let him finish what he started. She turned and walked out. Taza followed. Outside, the wind shifted. Clara mounted her horse, saddle creaking beneath her. She looked at Taza. I want to go home. He raised an eyebrow. The land. No, she said. Somewhere else. Somewhere quiet. He nodded. I know a place. They rode without speaking. As the town faded behind them, Clara felt the weight on her chest lift, not because justice had been served in a courtroom, but because she had chosen to survive on her terms. The world might forget her name, but she wouldn't, and neither would the man who rode beside her, silent as ever, her shadow, her storm, her steady hand in a world that had tried and failed to drown her. Somewhere ahead, the horizon waited, endless and untamed. The wind carried the scent of juniper and rain, stirring the tall grass as it whispered through the valley. Clara stood beneath a cottonwood, her fingers brushing the bark. Her boots were dust-worn, her coat faded from long rides and firelight, but her spine was straight, her chin lifted. It had been months since they left Copper Ridge, yet the memory of that place, of what she'd faced there, clung like a scar she no longer tried to hide. Taza's voice rose from behind her, low and steady. You keep looking west. She turned. It's where I came from, and where I buried everything I was. He nodded, walking up beside her. Then let's not go back. They were two people who had been cast out in different ways, she for speaking, he for existing, and together they had carved a place between worlds. A land that didn't belong to anyone else. A life not built on the bones of others. They had found an abandoned homestead a week's ride from any settlement, cradled between low hills and a freshwater creek that hadn't gone dry in a decade. The barn leaned, the roof sagged, and wildflowers bloomed between cracked fence posts. But it was theirs. Clara worked the soil with her bare hands, clearing roots, planting seed. Taza hunted, built traps, fixed the roof in quiet rhythm. At night, they sat by the fire in a cabin that smelled of pine and smoked meat, saying little, needing less. One evening, as lightning painted the sky in bruised streaks, Clara reached for the beaded necklace she wore. It had been Taza's once, now hers. Not a wedding ring, not a vow, but something older, something true. I never asked, she said, watching the storm roll across the ridge. Why you stayed. You found me half dead. You could have walked away. Taza stirred the fire with a stick, eyes on the embers. Because you didn't beg. She blinked. That's why. You didn't beg, he said again. You fought the river. You looked at men who meant to kill you and never flinched. I've seen warriors fall for less. She looked down, almost embarrassed. I don't feel like a warrior. You are. Silence sat comfortably between them, broken only by the wind and the hiss of rain on the porch roof. The next morning brought riders. 3 men, faces hidden beneath dusted hats, approached from the tree line. Their horses moved with purpose. They weren't strangers to hard land or harder business. Clara saw them first. She was fetching water from the creek, bucket sloshing against her leg, when she caught movement beyond the cottonwoods. She didn't run. She set the bucket down, wiped her hands on her skirt, and stepped forward to meet them before they reached the porch. The lead rider pulled his horse to a stop. He was older, with silver in his beard and a scar across his throat. His voice rasped like gravel. You Clara Renshaw? I am, she said evenly. He glanced at the cabin, then at the land. Heard there was a woman living up this way with an Injun man. Heard she owned papers tied to a stretch of gold-rich soil. Clara said nothing. The man leaned forward. I ain't here to rob you. I'm here to offer a deal. Sell the papers. Walk away with gold. Or don't. But men are coming. Others. The kind that don't offer first. Behind her, the cabin door creaked. Taza stepped out, rifle slung casually over one shoulder. The man's eyes shifted. He didn't reach for his gun, but his posture changed. I've had men come for me before, Clara said. They didn't leave with much. The man chuckled without humor. That so? She stepped forward. You said there's gold under my land. Maybe. Maybe not. But I won't sell it. I won't leave. And I won't run. He studied her, then Taza. Then the house. The fields. The silence. You're gonna die out here, he said. Maybe, she replied. But not today. The man didn't argue. He clicked his tongue, turned his horse, and rode off. The others followed. No threats. Just dust and silence in their wake. Taza stepped beside her. He'll come back. I know. They didn't speak of it again. They simply worked. The cabin grew stronger. The fields took root. A child was born to a passing couple Clara once helped through a storm, and they came back to settle near the creek. Then another family came, quiet, kind, eager to trade. A small fire sparked into a flame. A settlement began. Clara became something of a myth among them. The river widow, some called her. The woman who rose from water and married a man of earth. But she didn't chase legends. She fed chickens. She washed clothes in the stream. She kissed Taza with a quiet reverence that didn't need an audience. Their marriage was not made under law, but beneath moonlight and drumbeat, in a small circle of stone by the cottonwood tree, where she stood in a handmade dress and spoke only the truth, that she had loved once before and lost, and that she had learned to love again because she was saved, and because she had chosen to save herself. That night, stars spilled across the sky like a river of fire. Taza pressed his forehead to hers and whispered words in his language that Clara didn't yet know but already understood. She fell asleep in his arms, the fire crackling beside them, the world at peace, for now. Seasons passed, and when men did return, greedy, armed, ready, they were met not by a frightened widow or a lone warrior, but by a growing community. Farmers, riders, children. And Clara, standing in the center, rifle in hand, eyes calm. They never came back after that. Years later, when the valley had a name and the town had a schoolhouse, someone asked Clara how she came to this place, why she stayed when the world had tried to wash her away. She answered simply, I wasn't meant to be owned. Not by grief. Not by men. Not even by the past. And when she walked home that night, her shawl fluttering in the warm breeze, she paused at the edge of the cottonwood grove and turned her face toward the river that once tried to kill her. I survived you, she whispered. And the river, older than memory, said nothing. Because it already knew.